Russia was in chaos. The Bolsheviks had seized power, civil war raged, and the country's future was uncertain. Amid the turmoil, Admiral Alexander Kolchak rose to lead the White forces, vowing to crush communism. But his rule was short-lived, ending in betrayal and execution. This is the story of his dramatic rise and fall. Early military career. Kolchak was not born into power. He earned his reputation through war. Joining the Russian Imperial Navy in the late 19th century, he quickly proved his skills as a strategist and explorer. His early assignments took him to the Arctic, where he mapped unknown territories and became a respected figure in naval circles. But it was the Russo-Japanese War, 1904-1905, that tested him in battle. Serving in the Pacific Fleet, Kolchak witnessed firsthand Russia's humiliating defeat. The war was a disaster for the empire, exposing weaknesses in its military. Despite the losses, Kolchak distinguished himself, earning a promotion and gaining valuable experience that would later shape his leadership. World War I and the Black Sea Campaign. By the outbreak of World War I, Kolchak had become a top naval commander. As head of the Black Sea Fleet, he launched aggressive campaigns against the Ottoman Empire. His forces bombarded enemy ports, sank Turkish ships, and disrupted supply lines. Under his leadership, Russia controlled much of the Black Sea, securing vital trade routes. His leadership was bold and effective, earning him the respect of his men. However, he was known for his strict discipline and harsh punishments for failure. While some saw this as necessary in wartime, others believed it made him unpopular among lower-ranking officers and sailors. But the war was not going well for Russia. The front lines were crumbling, morale was collapsing, and political unrest was spreading. In 1917, revolution broke out. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, and Russia spiraled into chaos. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, seized power, pulling Russia out of the war and executing the royal family. Kolchak saw the Bolsheviks as traitors. He had dedicated his life to serving the empire, and now it was being dismantled. He refused to accept Soviet rule and was forced into exile, but his fight was not over. The Russian Civil War. By 1918, Russia was torn apart by civil war, with the Reds, Bolsheviks, and Whites, anti-communist forces, fighting for control. As the conflict escalated, Admiral Alexander Kolchak returned from exile to join the White movement. He quickly gained the backing of Britain and France, both deeply concerned about the spread of communism in Russia. In November 1918, a coup in Omsk removed the weak and divided White leadership. Kolchak, a decisive and disciplined military leader, seized power and declared himself supreme ruler of Russia. He was no politician. His primary objective was to crush the Bolsheviks and restore stability. Kolchak's rule was strict and authoritarian. He reinstated harsh discipline in the army, executed suspected Bolshevik sympathizers, and imposed martial law in the areas under his control. While his supporters viewed him as a strong leader necessary to defeat the Reds, others saw him as a ruthless dictator who ruled with an iron fist. Kolchak's military campaigns against the Bolsheviks. With foreign backing, Kolchak launched an offensive against the Red Army in early 1919. His forces advanced deep into Bolshevik territory, capturing key cities in Siberia and the Ural Mountains. At one point, his troops were within 300 kilometers of Moscow. It seemed like victory was possible. But the Bolsheviks had advantages. Led by Leon Trotsky, the Red Army was better organized, had more troops, and controlled key industrial regions. Kolchak's forces, stretched thin across Siberia, struggled to maintain supply lines. One of the biggest problems was logistics. Kolchak's army relied on the Trans-Siberian Railway, which was constantly attacked by Bolshevik partisans. Without steady supplies, his soldiers lacked food, ammunition, and medical care. Desertions increased, and morale collapsed. Meanwhile, brutality on both sides alienated civilians. Kolchak's forces executed Bolshevik supporters, but the Red Army responded with equal cruelty. Siberian villages were caught between two ruthless factions, making it harder for Kolchak to gain local support. As the Red Army counterattacked, Kolchak's offensive collapsed. His troops were pushed back, and by mid-1919, the White Army was in retreat. The harsh Siberian winter only made things worse. Temperatures dropped below 40 degrees, and thousands of soldiers died from frostbite and starvation. Betrayal and capture. By late 1919, Admiral Alexander Kolchak's grip on power was rapidly slipping away. His administration in Omsk, once the center of the anti-Bolshevik government, had become a symbol of inefficiency and corruption. Widespread mismanagement, unchecked brutality, and internal disputes weakened the White movement from within. Even his foreign allies, including the British and French, began to lose faith in his leadership. The British, who had provided military aid and advisory support, decided to withdraw their backing. Meanwhile, local uprisings against White rule intensified, further destabilizing Kolchak's already crumbling authority. Forced to flee eastward toward Irkutsk, Kolchak hoped to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. However, his greatest betrayal came from the Czechoslovak Legion, a battle-hardened force of former Austro-Hungarian soldiers who had been fighting alongside the Whites. Tired of the endless war and desperate to secure their own safe passage out of Russia, they struck a deal with the Bolsheviks. In January 1920, they captured Kolchak and handed him over to his enemies. The Bolsheviks wasted no time. After a brief sham trial, he was sentenced to death. On February 7, 1920, Kolchak was taken to the frozen Angara River, where he was executed by firing squad. His body was discarded beneath the ice, never to be recovered. Hero or tyrant, Kolchak's death marked the end of White resistance in Siberia. Within months, the Bolsheviks crushed the remaining White forces and secured control over Russia. Lenin's Soviet government would rule for decades, shaping the course of world history. For years, Soviet propaganda painted Kolchak as a brutal dictator. But after the Soviet Union collapsed, his legacy was re-examined. Some saw him as a tragic hero who tried to save Russia. Others argued he was an ineffective leader who lacked political vision. Historians remain divided. Supporters argue that Kolchak was a patriot who fought to save Russia from communism. They highlight his military achievements and his commitment to defeating the Bolsheviks. Critics say Kolchak was an authoritarian ruler whose cruelty alienated potential allies. They point to his harsh policies and inability to maintain order. Admiral Alexander Kolchak's life was defined by war, loyalty, and betrayal. From a brilliant naval officer to the self-declared ruler of Russia, he fought against the rising tide of Bolshevism, but in the end, he was defeated. His execution ended White resistance in Siberia and solidified Bolshevik control over Russia. If you found this article informative, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.